I made like 20, and I was like, there's gonna be leftovers, and I don't think there is. So thank you so much to everyone that took 1 or 3 or 4.
I'm putting them back.
That's great. That's just wonderful. It's such a gift to be able to have our kids go to camp and everything like that, and for us to pray for them as they go. Dan and I are going to go and wave them off tomorrow morning by the school, so we'll give them all of our love and push that bus down the road. So awesome. Well, welcome. I'm Kara. I'm one of the pastors here at Bucklin Free Methodist Church. And if you've been journeying with us over the last 6-7 weeks, we've been going through the 7 churches of Revelation. The 7 churches of Revelation are found in Revelation 2 and Revelation 3. And so as we start, we're just going to kind of review our cool map that, I have to carry this the right way, okay, that we've been doing. So as a reminder, this is all happening in what we consider modern Turkey. At the time, it was called Asia Minor. So that's a map of Europe, and then over on the bottom right side is what we would call Turkey today. So here's kind of zoomed in. And so if we remember about the book of Revelation, John the Revelator, also called John the Disciple, John the Beloved, John the Evangelist, he is exiled to the land of Patmos, or the little island. That's what that little dot is. And this is somewhere around the 90s, 80s, 90s. So John is a pretty old man. He's the only disciple to have lived this long. And while on that island, he receives a vision from God. And Jesus comes to him in a vision and gives him the book of Revelation. And that's what Revelation is. And so part of this is that Jesus also says, I have a message for these 7 churches on mainland Asia Minor, or modern-day Turkey. And so as we kind of keep learning about this, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's called the chiastic structure of these churches. So if you remember back from like middle school, Susan's really excited about that. If you remember back from like middle school English class when you learned about poetry, chiastic or chiasm is a way of literary devices. You start with something and then you talk about more things and then you kind of work your way out. So if we remember, this is not a perfect upside down U, but we can kind of see it, right? And you've got Ephesus on the left, kind of closest to Patmos. And then across from it, we say is Laodicea. And then we work our way up, and we have Smyrna. Across from it, sort of, is Philadelphia, which is today's city. And then at the top, we have these 3 other cities of Pergamum, Thyatira, and Sardis. And so that's kind of how they work, and we're going to, yes, okay, the right way. Okay, so we're going to kind of go through this. So Ephesus is our first city, right? And if we remember about Ephesus, this is way back on April 16th, that God had something good to say about Ephesus, and he had something not so good to say about Ephesus. He was like, good job for having good doctrine, but you've stopped loving me, right? And so he's like, let's work on this, come back to the love of me, and still do good practice and good doctrine, but make sure I'm your main focus. And so next week is Laodicea. And I'm not going to talk about Laodicea because I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But similarly, Jesus is like, good job, but you're also really failing in this area. And if you've read the 7 churches of Revelation, if you read Revelation 2 and 3, you'll remember that Laodicea is that city that Jesus talks about hot, cold. So that's kind of where that's at. So then next we have Smyrna. Smyrna, Jesus had nothing negative to say about it. Smyrna was the city, and it's paired with today's city. And so Philadelphia has nothing bad to say about it either. Smyrna was the city that was under a lot of persecution. Smyrna was just having all these things going on with it. And Jesus is just like, I love you. I see you. I know things are hard. In Smyrna, as well as in the city of Philadelphia for today's passage, Jesus comments on the synagogue of Satan. And this was a phrase that was used to talk about certain Jews within the synagogue in the city of Smyrna. And if we remember, you have Romanism, right? You got Roman and all their pantheon of gods. And then you have the Jews over here who are monotheists, and they just believe in the one true God. And so they kind of made deals with the Roman emperor and the Roman government to say, look, we're not going to bow down to you, but we're just going to stay over here quietly. So just let us be in our synagogue and let us do our thing. And they're like, okay, cool, right? They gave them the right kind of money, and it all worked out. Well, when Christianity came on the scene in the book of Acts, the Roman government's like, those are Jews, but they're kind of different. And so at first they were like, okay, we're just going to let these Christians be a sect or a version of Judaism. But as we know, as we read Acts and we read the Pauline epistles, we see that there's something different, that Christians begin to act differently than the Jews do. And so for the most part, in places like Smyrna and Philadelphia, the Christians would still try to be in the synagogue. They're like, hey, we're still brothers. We still have this whole same God going on. And so what started happening with the synagogue against Satan is that they're like, no, you're drawing too much attention to us. We're getting in trouble with the imperial cult. That's like the emperor worship. And so there were specific Jews, this is not all Jews, but specific Jews within the synagogue who would kind of tattle on the Christians, kind of get them to be the ones persecuted and not themselves. So to Smyrna, Jesus says, I see you. I see you're being persecuted, that you're poor, that you're being mistreated, but take heart. Remain faithful. And so, again, there's nothing bad that Jesus says about Smyrna. So then, today is Philadelphia, and like it, we have an issue with the synagogue of Satan, but there's nothing bad said. So then we go into Pergamum and Thyatira and Sardis, and they're all grouped together. And Jesus has some, kind of good things to say about them. It's kind of like when you're interacting with little kids and they're in trouble, but you don't want to just, break their spirit. So you're like, great job for standing up, but you made a huge mess, right? So you kind of try to encourage them a little bit, but then you tell them all the things that they need to fix. So Pergamum was a church that had mixed marriage. They were mixing their practices and the practices of the imperial cult. They understood that there was a sword from Jesus' mouth that could do one of two things. It could either cut away all the bad practices they had, and it could be a positive, or it's going to cut you away, sort of thing. And Jesus said, which one? Do you want to be married to me, or do you want to be married to the world? And then we have Thyatira. And Thyatira was a church that was great at doing good acts with a proper love, but they fell into the trap of tolerating Jezebel. So again, it was an issue of tolerance. It was an issue of allowing the world to be too much involved in the church and just not being true and faithful to God. And then 2 weeks ago, we had Sardis. If you remember, last week we skipped for, had a Pentecost break. So Sardis was dead, but had a good reputation. And Dan gave the example of a star, that you see the light of the star, but that star is actually dead. And it's dead because it died and burned out a long time ago, but we kind of see the after effects of it. So Jesus said, you need to wake up. You need to actually be alive, not just point to the things you did in the past. So this is kind of what this chiastic structure is. We kind of start out, we go in, and then we come back out. And so, as a reminder, all of these 7 cities were real at one time. Most of them are now destroyed and are just ruins. All of them are real, or were real congregations. There were real live people that were here. These aren't just talking about things hypothetically or using these as moral examples. These were real people that a letter went to. But these were also reminders and check-ins for us. One of the reasons that we read them and we look at them, not just to know, okay, that's what happened, but we also want to look at each of these churches and think about the ways Jesus is saying to us as a church and us as individuals, good job, bad job, and do better. So if you've missed any of these sermons, I encourage you to go online. You can go to our Facebook page. You don't have to have an account, but I encourage you to go back and watch any that you missed. So today we're on Philadelphia, church number 6. The city of Philadelphia was the youngest of all 7 cities that are being written to. It was formed sometime around 159 BC. So it's not quite, or it's a little over 200 years old at this point. Kind of like how old we are, right? And so it was founded by the ruler of the kingdom of Pergamum. So we have the city of Pergamum, and then there's kind of the kingdom that kind of expanded out of Pergamum as well. And this man's name was Attalus II. And Attalus II founded Philadelphia for the purpose of spreading the Greek language and Greek culture and ideology. Essentially, the surrounding areas of Lydia and Phrygia, he wanted them to be what we call Hellenized or Greekified. He wanted to make sure that when we looked at them, they were Greek, not their own native cultures. So, as many of us remember back from middle school or high school history classes, we know that the spreading of language, culture, and even religion often happened by conquering and colonization of a place. For whatever reason, the ruler, Attalus II, chose to do this peacefully. He chose not to just go in and hold swords to their throats and say, "Be Greek." He created a city, and he allowed the doors of that city to be open so that the ideas, language, and culture of Greece, of the Greco kind of Romanness, was able just to flow out. And people could come and visit, and it would flow in. And this is what was called an open door to spreading Greek ideas in the land beyond. This idea of open door is really important and really kind of takes the foundation of our letter. So the question becomes, where did the name Philadelphia come from? It's not from the peaceful attitude of the Hellenization, although that kind of seems like it would be. It actually was a nickname for the ruler, Attalus II. So as many of you know from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Philadelphia means brotherly love. Attalus II had such devotion and love for his own brother, Eumenes, that Attalus II was called Philadelphos, or one who loves his brother. And so since Attalus II was the ruler, and he's the one that kind of charters to have this city built and founded, the people who found it, they're like, we're going to name it after you. So that's where Philadelphia came from. So this concept of naming also becomes vitally important to our text. So the land that Philadelphia was built on was on a great plain called the Katakekamene, which means burned land. And this area, this burned land, these plains, was an area where volcanoes had previously been very active. And so they left extremely fertile soil from the ash and the lava. Some of you know that fertile soil from ash and lava is actually really good for the growing and harvesting of grapes to make wine. This is very similar to areas of the West Coast, like Napa Valley, or where I grew up in the Willamette Valley of Oregon, which is very much known for its dormant volcanoes and its grape growing. So the issues, though, with being in such a fertile land where volcanoes had once been, is that they are also on earthquake fault zones. About a decade or so ago in Oregon, there were these reports coming out about the big one. And because of where Portland sits on multiple rivers crossing and in between two large mountain ranges, there was this preparation that started. People started panicking. They're like, we have to be ready. And the Oregon website for the Department of Hazards and Preparation says this about the big one. Oregon has the potential for a 9.0 or greater magnitude earthquake caused by the Cascadia subduction zone and a resulting tsunami of up to 100 feet in height that will impact the coastal area. There will be an estimated 5 to 7 minutes of shaking or rolling that will be felt along the coastline, with the strength and intensity decreasing the further inland you are. Growing up and living in the shadows of volcanoes, the shadows of great tsunami zones, we kind of have this knowledge that an earthquake or a volcano could happen at any time. I think it's probably a lot like those of you who are native to the Midwest, who know that something like a tornado can happen at any moment. And that there's always kind of a sense of, where's our safety? What do we do? Preparedness kind of thing. But regardless of where we live, whether it's in these volcano, tsunami, earthquake zones, or it's a tornado alley, the next big one is just the risk we take to live where we do. So our city of Philadelphia lived in this amazing grape growing area and was fertile and successful in winemaking. Their wines went out to the whole world. But in AD 17, about 175 years after Philadelphia was founded, Philadelphia and the surrounding area of the Katakamene Plain had their big one. Sardis and 10 other cities were destroyed, but not as cataclysmically as Philadelphia. And they had tremors and aftershocks that went on for years. It was so bad that most of the city actually fled. Most of the inhabitants of the city fled to the plains. And they built huts, and they kind of lived out there as these aftershocks kept going on. Even 70 years later, when we're in our passage of today, the people and the descendants of this earthquake were always waiting and prepared for the next one. They were always watching to see what pillar was going to land on them. So that's a long story, but it's very important to our text, and it's going to really impact how we understand this passage. So I encourage you now to open Revelation 3 with me today. We are in Revelation 3, verses 7 through 13. Okay, Revelation 3, starting in verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and where he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I've placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will also write on them my new name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Let's pray. Lord, we ask that today as we are in this passage of the letter to the church of Philadelphia, we just ask that the things that you are asking for us each to know and us to know as a community that you will make known to us. We ask that as we open the word that you will speak to us and that we will be edified and that you will be glorified through this. In Jesus' name. So let's start with verse 7. To the angel of the church in Philadelphia, write, these are the words of him who is holy and true, who holds the key of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. So as a reminder, each one of these letters starts with to the angel at. So angel can either mean one or two things. It can mean a literal, spiritual angel, supernatural being that was given the letters and then took them to each city. Or this is just messenger, because in Greek, the word angelos, where we get angel, literally just means messenger. So we're leaving this kind of up in the air because the text doesn't specify it for us in English, and even in the Greek, like I said, it just is angelos. Jesus is called holy, true, who holds the key of David. In this, Jesus is reminding the people of Philadelphia truths. Jesus is holy. That means he's God. Jesus is true. There are many people who want to deny that Jesus is who he says he is, but he is true, and that is why we, the churches, are called to remain true in him. And Jesus holds the key of David. The key of David is mostly likely an Old Testament reference to a man named Eliakim. Eliakim was the palace administrator during King Hezekiah's reign. King Hezekiah's story is found in 2 Kings, chapters 18 through 20. But in the book of Isaiah, he has this prophecy to say. Isaiah is told that Eliakim would receive the keys to the house of David. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. So the palace administrator was the one with the keys to the whole entire palace. He was the one who could lock and unlock, open and close any door in the palace. And Jesus is this one. He has the keys to the New Jerusalem, to the city of God. He gets to open and close, lock and unlock. Verse 8, I know your deeds. See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut. I know you have a little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. So as I mentioned in the history of Philadelphia, Philadelphia was considered an open door to Greek culture and language. The ruler, Attalus II, wanted the surrounding areas to be Hellenized, to adopt Greek culture and language, but he didn't want to force it upon them. So he opened the doors of Philadelphia, so to speak, and allowed the Greek culture and language to spread. It It was believed that this was so pervasive that the city of Lydia, the Lydians, had forgotten their language by AD 17 and were all but Greek. So the key of David, which Jesus has, is the key to open the door. And he's opening it so that no one can shut. Just like the city of Philadelphia is open for the spreading of Hellenism, so Philadelphia is open for spreading the message of Jesus. When Philadelphia, Pennsylvania was colonized, William Penn, who was a Quaker, was given a charter by King Charles II to colonize the land. Penn, being a Quaker, did not believe in force, so he purchased the land from the Lenape people. He hoped that by compensating the Lenape people for the land, it would lead to friendship and peace. William Penn named the area Philadelphia because he wanted there to be brotherly love. As many of you may remember in history class, during the early American colonization, many of the original colonies were each colonized or kind of founded by a specific denomination or tradition. So we had like the Puritans in Massachusetts, and we had some Anglicans kind of down in the southern areas. But Penn wanted there to be true religious freedom in Pennsylvania. So he said, nope, we're not founding this under one denomination. We're just allowing everyone, regardless of what they believe, to come and be a part of this. This is why Philadelphia became one of the most important cities in the colonies. So for our Philadelphia in the text, a similar thing happened. Because the government had opened the door for the dispersal of Greek culture and language, many people came there, whether it was to visit, or it was merchants, or it was coming to live. So at that time, Philadelphia did not have an overwhelming Christian population. In the second half of this verse, Jesus says, I know that you have little strength, yet you have kept my word and have not denied my name. So this strength could be implying a couple of things. But one is in connection to verse 9 and the attacks and persecution from the synagogue of Satan. Similar to what we talked about with Smyrna. Jesus is commending them. Even their small size, they are faithful. This faithfulness has stretched pretty much for the last 2,000 years. While much of Asia Minor, the kind of area on our map, fell to the Turks and Muslims, Philadelphia is the only city to have stayed firm. Scottish theologian William Bucklin wrote, Philadelphia was the last bastion of Asian Christianity. It was not until midway through the 14th century that it fell. And to this day, there is a Christian bishop and 1,000 Christians in it. With the exception of Smyrna, the other churches are in ruins. But Philadelphia still holds aloft the banner of the Christian faith. So I kind of think what Barclay is referring to is that at least until the 1970s, only 50 years ago, there were still Catholic bishops in Philadelphia, which is the modern-day city of Al-Sahar. So even now, or at least 50 years ago, the city of Philadelphia has still been an open door to the gospel. Verses 9 and 10. I will make those who are of the synagogue of Satan, who claim to be Jews, though they are not, but are liars, I will make them come and fall down at your feet and acknowledge that I have loved you. Since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come on the whole world to test the inhabitants of the earth. So we've already talked about the synagogue of Satan, so I'm not going to go into depth. But as a reminder, this is not a statement about Jews in general. This is not Jesus being anti-Semitic. This does not give us permission to be anti-Semitic. The synagogue of Satan was a phrase used on a very specific and particular people within the synagogue who were handing Christians over to the Roman government for their own personal gain. So there's this line about falling down at the feet and acknowledging that Jesus loves them. This is a reference to an Old Testament prophecy saying that non-Jews would eventually pay homage and respect to the Jews in the New Age. We have this in Isaiah chapter 60, verse 14. The children of your oppressors will come bowing before you. All who despise you will bow down at your feet. And then Isaiah 49, verse 23. Kings will be your foster fathers, and their queens your nursing mothers. They will bow down before you with their faces to the ground. They will lick the dust at your feet. Then you will know that I am the Lord. Those who hope in me will not be disappointed. And then finally, Zechariah 8:23. This is what the Lord Almighty says. In those days, 10 people from all languages and nations will take firm hold of one Jew by the hem of his robe and say, let us go with you, because we have heard that God is with you. As Jesus often does, he flips the script. The Jews expected this to be a prophecy about them. But Jesus is saying, this is a prophecy for the people of God. The people of God, we believe, are the church. Jews are still allowed to be a part of this if they come into the church and they acknowledge Jesus, right? But we understand that they're still holding to what we consider to be the Old Testament. And so because of that, Jesus says, you're not really my people anymore. Jesus still loves the Jews. They still have a special place in his heart. But there's a divide. He said, no, the church, they're now the people of God. And so just as Jesus has the keys to the house of David, he is opening it for them. In John talks about Jesus being the door or the gate, right? Jesus is the door. He's the one opening it. We have to go through him. Sometimes we think something is for us because it was at one time. But it's only with pride and arrogance that we can think that those same things that were once promised or prophesied about us are still about us if we have not been faithful and true. So the church in Philadelphia is keeping Jesus' command to endure patiently. They're staying faithful even when there are Jews who are pushing them out of the synagogue doors, when they are being handed over to the imperial cult and government. They are not wavering. So Jesus is telling them, as long as you endure, as long as you stay faithful to me, because I am faithful to you, you will have your eternal reward. You will be opened into the new Jerusalem, which only Jesus has the keys to. Verse 11 and 12. I am coming soon. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. The one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of my city of God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from God. And I will also write on them my new name. So as mentioned in the history of Philadelphia, the city and region had a large earthquake in 17 AD that completely destroyed the city. Emperor Tiberius, around that time, allowed them to not pay taxes so that they could spend that money instead on rebuilding their city. So there's earthquake relief. Philadelphia was so thankful, at one point they actually renamed the city to Neo-Caesarea, which means the new city of Caesar. If we remember in the Gospels, we have a Caesarea, which means city of Caesar. So a little while later, sometime around the 70 ADs, they renamed the city again to Flavia, in honor of Emperor Vespasian, whose family name was Flavius. Neither of these names stuck, and each time they went back to Philadelphia, and up until it being named Al-Shahar, it was Philadelphia. But the Philadelphians, they like to pay homage and respect to whatever emperor or ruler helped them out. This is kind of like here in Bucklin. Bucklin was not originally the name. Does anybody know what Bucklin was originally named in 1885? Great job. Yes, Corbin. Thanks, Lindsay. So it was 2 years later, in 1887, it was renamed as Bucklin. The Wikipedia doesn't actually say it, so if any of you know why, you should go on and edit Wikipedia. But similarly, the building we reside in has not always been called Bucklin Free Methodist Church. Some of you have attended this church in this building under multiple names, under multiple congregations. Name changes can be hard. They take an emotional toll on us and perhaps even confuse our identity. We're like, well, I'm this, and then I was this, and now I'm this, right? Often, name changes are in response to either destruction or rebuilding of something. In verse 12, Jesus says, the one who is victorious, I will make a pillar in the temple of my God. Never again will they leave it. I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. From what I understand, by the time Revelation is written, it had been a while since these earthquakes and tremors. So their rebuilding was there, and it was good to go, but there was still this fear. But perhaps the people who had experienced it as little kids were adults, and they were afraid of it, or it was their children and grandchildren they had told stories to of how horrible and devastating the destruction was for about a decade. Many of them lived with caution of what building or what pillar would fall on them at any moment. They often had to be in a state of being ready to leave the city for the safety of the open plains. They always had their escape route. But Jesus says, the one who is victorious. This means the one who holds on, the one who remains faithful and steadfast, the one who does not forsake Jesus. He and she will be made into a pillar in the temple of God. Never again will they leave it. Never again will the pillars come down. Never again will they feel like they have to flee for safety, because they will be the physical structure that cannot be destroyed. Jesus is promising them that they will be strong, that they will be permanent fixtures in God's house. Nothing will make them leave. They will receive permanency. And isn't that what we all really want, is stability and permanency? But Jesus doesn't stop there. He addresses the issue of an ever-changing name. He says, I will write on them the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem, which is coming down out of heaven from my God, and I will also write on them my new name. So first they receive the name of God, the name of the city of God, which is the new Jerusalem, and Jesus' new name, which we don't know. That's one of those things that's hidden from us. They will receive a permanent and stable name, a permanent stable identity, and a permanent stable fixture. They will be a permanent pillar in the temple of God. And this is what's really cool, is that temple of God comes down from heaven. The new earth and new heaven will meet. They don't have to build the new Jerusalem. It comes pre-built. For a people who are constantly having to rebuild and patch up, knowing that they don't have to do that work anymore, it's pretty amazing. Emperor Tiberius gave them earthquake relief in the form of stopping the taxes, but they had to rebuild. But when God provides earthquake relief, it is permanent, stable, and already completed. So like Smyrna, Jesus had nothing bad to say about Philadelphia. Instead, Jesus recognized that what they were going through, and he reminded them of who he is. Jesus said that he is holy and true. Jesus reminds them, I am God. Jesus tells them that he has the key of David. He says that only he is the one who can unlock and open or lock and close doors in the house of David. And this has a couple of meanings, but one of them is that Jesus has the authority to who he admits into the New Jerusalem. Second, in connection with the phrase, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut, Jesus has placed before the Philadelphian Christians, he has placed the Philadelphian Christians in a place of spreading the gospel to others. Philadelphia as a city was a bastion of Greek culture and language, but Philadelphia as a church has been a bastion of the gospel for nearly 2,000 years. Jesus was telling them that while they had been kicked out and the doors closed and locked of the synagogue, God's earthly temples, they would be placed as a permanent pillar in his home that nobody could remove them from. This was something that as long as they endured patiently, they would not be locked out of. The door was open to them. And finally, although they lived both physically and spiritually with little strength and often with the notion of feeling that they had to leave, both because of the physical environment around them and spiritually because of their Jewish brothers, God would give them permanent stabilities and they would receive his name. So church, as we kind of wrap up here, these are my questions and challenges to you. First, are you enduring patiently? When doors have been closed to you, when you face trials and hardships, are you standing firm? Or are you caving and crumbling to that which is around you? This doesn't mean that we close doors on others. It doesn't mean that just because we experience hardship, we put those on others. We are called simply to endure patiently. Pray for patient endurance. Second, are you holding the door of the gospel open? Or have you closed the gospel door? Are you determining who is in and who is out? Some of the Jews who had closed the door on the Christians in Philadelphia, as well as Smyrna, they had determined who was in and who was out of the synagogue. Out and in of the house of David in the kingdom of God. This isn't our role. This is Jesus' role only. Are we, as a church, and as you as an individual, sharing Christ with the world? I want you to think about the last time that you sat down with someone and talked to them about Jesus. So just talk to someone about their faith. This is probably around here going to be someone that says they already are a Christian. And maybe they are. But we still need to have those conversations, inviting them into our open doors, inviting them into your open doors of conversation. Third, what is your name? We often get so fixated on what we are instead of whose we are. But we have the opportunity, if we stay faithful, to have God's name on us, to have the New Jerusalem written on us, and to have Jesus' name on us. Are you focusing on the name of whose you are, or focusing on the names of what you are? These can be family names, political or ideological names, geographical or regional names. It can be the names of professions and hobbies, or religious monikers and ideologies. You will be given a new and permanent name, and that name has nothing to do with who you currently are, except if you are enduring patiently. We endure by keeping his word. How do we keep his word? We get in Scripture. We spend time with Jesus. We come to church. We come to small group. And in that, we allow Jesus to give us his name. I pray that you endure. I pray that you open the doors to the gospel. And I pray that you expect his name. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches.
So now we're going to enter into a time of communion.